Welcome to this edition of Business Video Trends on TMCnet. I'm your host, Steve Onderhaar. This time we're taking a look at productivity perceptions and how they correlate with the extent of live webcasting deployment within an organization. In a survey of 1,212 corporate executives conducted by Interactive Media Strategies in the second quarter 2008, we asked respondents to agree or disagree with the notion that web communications technologies can enhance business productivity. In this slide, we report results of that particular survey question segmented by the extent of use of live webcasting capabilities by an organization. So at the top of this chart, we see the responses among those who originate at least 3/4 of all their webcasts deployed on a live basis. And what we see overall is that those who use live on an extensive basis are much more likely to have positive perceptions of web communications as a productivity enhancer as opposed to those who use live capabilities on a sparing basis. So among those organizations deploying at least 3/4 of their webcasts originating on a live basis, 46% strongly agree with the idea that web communications technology can enhance business productivity. Another 46% somewhat agree with that statement. Now, in comparison, at the bottom of this chart, we see the results for executives at companies that deploy less than 1/4 of their online webcasts on a live basis. So originating less than 1/4 of their content on a live feed. Among that group of sparing live users, only 27% agree with the notion that web communications technology can enhance productivity. 64% say they somewhat agree with that statement. So certainly more conviction or more belief among those who use live on an extensive basis about the productivity potential of webcasting and other web communications technologies as a productivity enhancing tool. Now, as we move to the next slide, let's look at the factors that people use when they're measuring the effectiveness and how these segment based on the extent of live deployment within an organization. And what we find here is something very interesting and almost contradictory to what we've talked about in prior year surveys. Here we see that those individuals and companies that use webcasting on a live basis, on an extensive basis, so those deploying webcasting on a live basis more than 3/4 of the time, they tend to focus more on the intangible benefits associated with measuring the effectiveness of web communications technologies. In this particular slide, we look at the factors that are cited as the two top issues that individuals cite when they look at the effectiveness of online communications capabilities. A significant delta or significant gap between the perceptions of those who use live extensively and those who do not use live very much at all. Among those who use live on an extensive basis, like we said, you look at the intangible benefits, increases the frequency of communication. 28% of those at organizations that integrate live into more than 3/4 of their online web events say that they favor that as a key measure of the effectiveness of web communications capabilities. That's higher than the 22% of those at companies that use live webcasting on a sparing basis. Likewise, we see greater interest among live users in issues such as improved comprehension and improving the brand image. So higher than average interest in some of these metrics that can be hard to measure, hard to prove, intangible benefits associated with the deployment of the technology. Now let's go to the bottom of this chart. This is where we see the factors that are cited more frequently by those who are using live capabilities, live webcasting less than 1/4 of the time in their webcast events. What we see here is that among these companies that lean more towards on-demand deployment, much more a hard-nosed financial calculation associated with it, cutting travel costs, generating sales leads, tying the results, tying the ROI to specific ROI factors, more popular among those who are deploying on-demand capabilities as opposed to those who are focusing on live webcasting capabilities. Now, this runs a bit counter to what we historically have thought about live webcasting, that in the early days of our marketplace, it's always been easier to sell live webcasting because it's a direct substitute for meetings that would require people to get on airplanes and stay in hotel rooms and generate lots of travel expenses. We see that historically the ROI has been measured out on a spreadsheet style basis that can be quantified in a very real way. But here we begin to see that those who are using live webcasting on an extensive basis begin to make that shift. They move beyond those quantifiable statistics and start looking more at the intangibles as the true measures of effectiveness for online multimedia capabilities. So what this begins to tell us is that the attributes of live and the attributes of on-demand should be promoted and evangelized in different ways by those who are encouraging individuals and organizations to adopt these technologies. Those that are interested in live capabilities may already assume that they are going to be cutting travel costs, that they already have satisfied the financial objectives and will be looking more to the intangible benefits associated with the deployment of the technology. Whereas those who are only involved in on-demand capabilities may be, shall we say, lower on the hierarchy of needs, if you will. They're trying to address the basic issues that are associated with proving out the benefit of the deployment of the technology. They're still stuck in the area of trimming expenses and increasing revenues as the key metrics associated with the successful deployment of the technology. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Business Video Trends on TMC Net. I'm Steve Onderhaar. Thanks for your time.